everyone! So we are back with another installment in our Rainbow Reads series. It's been a while since our last one. We did green books before this, and we're on to the next color of the rainbow, which is blue. So we've kind of picked light blue books for this video, so that we can do indigo for dark blue books. I don't really know what the color indigo is in my brain. It's just
deep
dark blue.
Purple.
Oh, is it?
Purpley blue.
We're gonna call it dark blue. for the sake of this series. Next up will be dark blue. Yes. So I think we've each picked 5-ish books, and we're gonna just go down the line and talk about them. Starting down at the end.
So, my first book is Murder Most Unladylike by Robin Stevens. This is a middle grade detective story about Daisy and Hazel. They've kind of put together their own detective agency at their like all-girls boarding school. It's in England in the 1930s, and their previous cases has been like, oh, somebody lost their pencil case, or like something so trivial. But one night, Hazel wanders into the gymnasium and she finds one of their teachers is dead. So she runs and she gets Daisy, and they come back and the body is missing. So this whole book is just like, it was really good.
I haven't heard of this series.
It's a British series. It's so much fun. It's very, they like think themselves Sherlock and Watson. They're just like, Daisy is the president and Hazel's the secretary, like the one who takes the minutes, but it's just the two of them. Like it's just really, and Hazel is, Daisy, she is very Sherlocky. She's very smart and she's very aloof. She's very, but yeah, it was a great mystery. I loved the setting, and there's a little school map at the beginning.
Oh, I love
so you can kind of see, where their dormitories are and where the
like
library is. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. I have the second book in the series that I haven't started yet, but I definitely want to read more of them because it was just
like so much fun.
And I love that cover.
Yeah. That was when we were in England last Christmas, this typeface just stood out on the shelf, and I'm like, I kind of need to buy that.
Is it YA or middle grade?
It's middle grade.
Middle grade.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
Cool.
Super fun.
What about you?
All right, fun. I'm gonna switch it around so I can do fun. So, Imaginary Fred. It's a couple years old. It's a little bit older, but I love it because it's about imaginary friends, and when you need an imaginary friend, they just wisp into the sky, and then when you don't need it, they just wisp out. But the thing about these friends is two friends, real life friends, meet up and they bring their imaginary friends. And their imaginary friends become friends, and at some point they all have a band together. And then the real friends forget about the imaginary friends, but strangely they don't wisp away, and they can't explain it, but the imaginary friends stay friends forever, and it's unheard of. And so a statue is actually put in their place because these imaginary friends ended up making it and not being whisked away, and they don't know if was it because of their friendship.
That is precious.
So yeah, I love it. I love how the imaginary friends are faded out.
Yeah, it's all kind of textural on there.
I had an imaginary friend, which is kind of weird because I came from a big family, and I think most of the times you don't need made-up friends, but for some reason I did have one. And so yeah, I really like this one. It's a different spin on imaginary friend.
Cute.
So, and illustrated by Oliver Jeffers.
And written by
Eoin Colfer.
I'm pretty sure it's Owen.
Owen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Owen Colfer.
Owen Colfer.
Yeah, I didn't know that he had written any picture books. That's very cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Very cute.
All right. I had a lot of fun going through my shelf and finding these ones. It was a lot of like need to revisit options. So my first one is the BFG by Roald Dahl. I think next to Matilda, which is also in my pile, this was probably my favorite Roald Dahl book as a kid, about a little girl, can't remember how old she is, a little girl named Sophie who's like probably 8-ish, who lives in an orphanage, and one night hears something strange out in the street when everyone else is asleep, and sees the BFG, the big friendly giant, going through the streets of London and like peering into people's windows with his big trumpet. And he sees her see him, so he has to take her away. He takes her to the land of the giants, where he is a big friendly giant to her, but in the land of giants, he is quite small, and he is the only one who's friendly.
He's the only one who doesn't eat human beings.
Yes, human beings. He eats snoz cucumbers instead. Or snoz, I can't remember
Yes,
what they're called.
Snoz-cumbers.
Snoz-cumbers, yeah. And so then, you know, Sophie finds out that these giants are eating human beings and is outraged. So the two of them hatch a plan to solve this, which involves some very top brass in the political world. So it's truly weird in Roald Dahl fashion. It's got the classic Quentin Blake illustrations. Oh, and what he's doing with the trumpet is that he's blowing dreams into people's through people's windows, and he also collects dreams. It's just great. It's so full of imagination and whimsy and weirdness and bone crunching. It's just great. If you haven't read it, definitely check it out. The movie's quite good as well, but always go to the source material. Yeah.
I think that's going to be my first Roald Dahl book ever. I actually own it already.
You own it, okay.
It's on my shelf, so I think it's going to be my first one ever.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
It's a good one to kind of like slide into the language of Roald Dahl, because there's lots of made up words in there.
So the first one I'm going to talk about is a 2018 release. So this one just came out and has this really great cover. It has Dare Mighty Things by Heather Kaczynski. This is a sci-fi book about teens competing to go to space.
Ooh, cool.
So it's like, the rules are simple. You must be gifted, you must be younger than 25, and you must be willing to accept the dangers that will face you if you win. And so it is about these teens, or under 25s, living together. It's going to be all top secret, and like competing to be the first one to join this mission to space.
Yeah.
And it's just great. It has a really cool, like, diverse cast of characters. You really get into the competition, and it has a lovely friendship group, and it's just, I just loved it. And it's so, like, action-packed, but it didn't feel, like, rushed.
Yeah.
Like, it's constant, things are constantly happening, or constantly in danger, but it also had, like, a great story to it. I just really loved it. I want to read more YA sci-fi, and I think if you would like to read it, this is a really good one to get into. It's only a duology. The second book just came out. Oh, so maybe I lied. Maybe this is a 2017 release. Okay. I think the sequel just came out, so. Quite enjoyed this one. And it has a great cover. That's great. I mean, it is blue, right? Bluish.
Yeah, totally.
Bluish.
Sure.
Alright, next up.
So my next one is another middle grade. This one's a fantasy, and it's Down the Mysterly River by Bill Willingham. He is the creator of the Fables graphic novels, which are really great. So in this we have Max the Wolf, who is a young boy who wakes up in this magical forest, with no memory of where he came from, but he is in his like Boy Scout outfit, and he's well prepared and he knows how to survive. But then he comes across these talking animals, and he's like, animals talk here? And it's just this really, it's hard to explain without giving stuff away, because there's twists and they're mind-blowing, but it's also like dark, and it feels like I had to double check a few times while I was reading it that it did say 10 and up, and I was like, this is creepy and scary.
Things can get pretty creepy and weird in middle grade.
I'm learning.
Yeah.
He bands together with a badger, this really scrappy barn tomcat, and this very friendly bear who feels that he is the sheriff. And it's his job to keep people in line, even though he's just a pushover. And they're on the run from these guys called the Blue Cutters. So they have these magical blue swords, and when you get cut with them, they change you. So it's just this fantasy, dark, on the run, kind of like a buddy adventure story with like interesting themes that I don't want to get into because it's spoiled stuff. But
it's on my TBR.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually reading that next. So
you're taking it back home with you.
Yeah.
It was a surprise. I had it on my shelf for a really long time. I've read through all the Fables graphics. I've read his other book called Peter and Max, which was like a YA-ish fantasy within that world. So I really wanted this. It just took me so long to pick it up. But I finally read it about 6 months ago, and I'm happy you're going to read it because I need to talk about it because it's just pretty intense, but very lovable as well. So, cool.
Yes. Okay. So I will be talking about graphic novels. This is one of my, I've added it, I actually don't know what year it was from, but I just found it at Powell's. And it's actually a graphic novel about the Holocaust. And it's a little girl. She goes through her parents first give her star, and they tell her that she's a sheriff. Right. So that she can cope with it, and then she finds out at school that she's not a sheriff. And then it goes through, she has to hide and her parents get taken. And so it's very serious material, but I love the approach to it, and I think it's great in the graphic novel version too. And the expressions, there's one page, I should have bookmarked it, but there's one page where she's going through all these emotions, and it's the simplest drawings, but the artist's expression, the way that they're able to draw it,
right.
Can't find it all, but is just amazing. And so if you want to approach a serious topic like that, I feel like this is a really good one because it kind of is from a kid's point of view, and I think it stays really true to it, and it doesn't necessarily have a happy ending, but she does see her parents again, so spoiler, but so if you are going to approach the subject with kids, I feel like this is a really good way to approach it, and visually you can see and understand things. So
interesting, cool.
Yes, hidden.
All right, my next one, I'll go with another childhood favorite of mine. And I don't know, like, I don't know if kids are still reading this one. I read this one probably when I was like 7 for the first time. And that is Mr. Popper's Penguins by Richard and Florence Atwater, who I believe are a married couple. It was written in the 30s, and it's about Mr. Popper, who is a house painter in just like middle America. And he's got a wife and 2 kids and just kind of this like normal life, but he in his spare time just like daydreams about exploring the South Pole. And so he writes a letter to this explorer, who actually writes him back, and not only sends him a letter but sends him a penguin, who then lives with the Poppers. But he's lonely, so they get a second penguin, and then suddenly there's a lot of penguins, and they build this like little ice habitat for them in the basement, and it's so charming. It's been a while since I've read it, so I can't totally remember, but I think, like, you know, it was written in the 30s. Some of the language might be a little bit dated compared to today, but it's so charming. And I think I read this one like over and over as a kid. It's a really fun read aloud. Yeah, it's just delightful. They made it into a movie with Jim Carrey, which I'm pretty sure is like so different from the book. I never saw it, but from the trailer I was like, not mine, Mr. Penguin. But yeah, I love this one. If you're looking for a fun animal story, especially for a read aloud, this is a great one.
Cute. Now, if you want something less fun,
I know, yeah, mine took it down a notch too.
But still fantastic, is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a well-loved book. I think it's been a bestseller for quite a long time. But this is about, at the beginning, a young boy named, young prince, I believe, named Patroclus. And he is exiled from his homeland, and he is brought into a court where he meets Achilles. So they're young boys that are kind of like brought up together, and they're like more than just friends. They're like, I don't know, bosom buddies, shall we say. Like they're kind of inseparable. Like where Achilles goes, Patroclus goes as well. And so when Achilles goes off to war, Patroclus goes with him, and it is like it's a retelling of the Achilles myth, and it's just so beautifully done, and it's a love story between the two characters, and it's just heartbreaking, but it's amazing, it's so well written. I cannot wait to read Circe, which is another retelling that Madeline just did. That's a retelling of that one as well, and she just did a fantastic job. And it's such a good book. Totally recommend it.
What age is it?
It's adult.
It is adult.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it is. But it is amazing. Very sad though.
Okay.
Oh, I'm so caught up in what you guys are talking about. I have no idea what I'm doing. So my next one is a YA, and that's Lois Lane Double Down by Gwenda Bond. This is the second in her Lois Lane series. I'm just obsessed with them. They're just, it's like a high school version of Lois Lane who ends up meeting Perry White and joins some other kids in creating like the online younger version of the Daily Planet.
Right.
And they just uncover mysteries. In the first book, yes.
Who's Perry White?
He is the main editor of the
Okay.
Daily Planet.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes. He's not, I guess he's not a very famous character.
No,
He's
I know
just
who you
Perry
mean
White.
now. Okay.
But yeah.
Thank you.
So I saw the first book a couple years ago when we were at YALLFest, and I was like, it's really intriguing, but like sometimes retellings can be a little bit cheesy, and you're just like, oh. But I picked it up anyway, and I loved it. I pre-ordered the second book, I pre-ordered the third book, and I just devoured them. And it's just, the mysteries are really good. The version of Metropolis is pretty cool, but just seeing it all from like a high school point of view. Clark is in it kind of, which I kind of like the way that he's in it. She meets him in this like online conspiracy group, and he's called Smallville Guy, and they just kind of like create this friendship. And within the books, there's this like virtual reality video game world that's like open world, so you can meet friends in it. So his avatar meets her avatar within the game. And that's kind of how they get to know each other and stuff. But yeah, I really liked this one a bit more than the first story actually, because this one was really urban and like downtown and like mad scientists and like crazy stuff. But in the third book, a new character was introduced who I'm really excited about. So I'm like, where's the fourth book? Where's the fourth book?
It's the worst.
So, if Gwenda happens to see this, fourth book, please. But yes, if you like superheroes and like the whole like DC universe and stuff like that, especially, and it's funny because I'm not a Superman person. I'm a Batman girl, and Superman can just like whatever. But I was a big fan, so it's just fun seeing well-known characters in a whole new atmosphere. Like, I love retellings. You all guys always know. Like, I like characters I know somewhere completely different. So
Cool.
Neat.
Okay. I realize I kind of have a theme here. I didn't mean to, but this one is Hortense and the Shadow, and it's by the O'Hara sisters. And it's beautiful. A girl sees her shadow in, much like Peter Pan, but she wants to get away from her shadow. And so she noticed her shadow keeps, stalking her. She does all these things to try and get away from the shadow, and she finally succeeds. But then her house gets broken into, and it actually ends up being her shadow that saves her and it actually has a bit of a Peter Pan feel, but her shadow comes and scares the bad guys, the bandits, away, and then she has a new appreciation and love for her shadow. It kind of has the kind of Peter Pan feel, but I love the illustrations are incredible.
Beautiful.
They're elegant and dark, but yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah.
And they just have a second book out now, and it also has bandits in it. So.
Gotta love a good bandit.
Well, I'll do a picture book one as well. I have 2 picture books, and they are also a little bit themed, so I might do them back to back. But another of my childhood favorites, Can't You Sleep, Little Bear. This is by Candlewick, publisher Candlewick, and they're actually the character in the Candlewick logo.
how sweet.
It's just this like really sweet going to bed book about a big bear and a little bear, who, you know, after a long day of exploring in the woods, tucks the little bear into bed, and he's afraid of the dark, and so he brings him, he's like, you know, there's nothing to be afraid of, but I'll bring you this little lantern. And then that's not quite enough, so he brings him a slightly bigger lantern, and it goes on and on like this until there's like a great big lantern, and it's still not quite enough. So they go back outside, they leave their cave and look at the big dark outside, and then realize that there's lots of stars and there's the moon, and it's not that scary out, and the dark is nothing to be afraid of. You know, we were out here during the day, and it's just really sweet. And yeah, my stuffed animal growing up was called Little Bear, so looks very much like Little Bear, so I have a real soft spot for this one. And that is by Martin Waddell and illustrated by Barbara Firth. There you go. Adorable.
I realized I picked some pretty serious books other than the first one I talked about. But the next one I'm going to talk about is one I read a few years ago now, and that is called A Teaspoon of Earth and Sea by Dina Nayari, which is a historical fiction book set in Iran in the 80s. And it follows, what's her name? 11-year-old? Yeah, at the beginning of the book she's an 11-year-old girl named Saba and her sister, and they are like obsessed with America, and they like have like they are always trying to memorize English words and like harbor like illicit recordings of like TV shows and like magazines and stuff, and like they're just obsessed with westernized music. And then one day her mother and her sister like inexplicably vanish. They're gone, and so she is like convinced in her heart of hearts that they've gone to America without her. There is no evidence of this, but she grows up believing that, just convinced that this is what happened. Her sister and her mother got to go to America and left her behind. So it's kind of her like exploration of fitting in with her community and her culture, and trying to deal with the fact that, you know, she's been left with no explanation. And it's just a beautiful book. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. The setting of Iran was really fascinating, and does pull at your heartstrings a little bit, but yeah, I get to grow up with Saba and her trying to deal with this thing that happened to her. And find out what actually happened.
I was gonna say, does it tell what happened?
I'm not gonna say. No spoilers.
Did they go that one to my TBR?
It's really
good.
Me
too. Yeah.
I really liked it. Yeah, I picked that one up on a whim when I was in Cambodia.
Cool.
Oh. Read it in Cambodia.
It's a hefty book to bring back with you.
Yeah, you know me though.
So my next one is almost a lot of blue, and that is The Only Thing Worse Than You Is Me, or The Only Thing Worse Than Me Is You, sorry, by Lily Anderson. This is a Much Ado About Nothing retelling set in a YA book in high school, and we all know Much Ado About Nothing is my favorite Shakespeare play, and to see those characters kind of reincarnated in like high schoolers was really a lot of fun. I do see sometimes even on Goodreads and some little reviews I read about this, they're like, oh, it's a Taming of the Shrew retelling. I'm like, no, no, it's not. Much Ado About Nothing. So that we have Beatrix and Benedict, so it's Trixie and Ben in this book, and they have the same like clashy personalities, but in the end they really kind of come to appreciate each other. But it was just so much fun. It was one of those like warm hug books you just needed. There's a great like Halloween scene and stuff where you can kind of tell that he always has a softer spot for her than she does, you know that. But yeah, it's just lots of fun. Lots of pop culture references. Just looking at the flap, I saw the word Daleks and Sherlock and Watson come up. So like, it's really nerdy, really fun.
And this is the same author of Undead Girl Gang.
Undead Girl Gang, which I haven't read.
Which is quite popular.
But I've read her other book called Not Now, Not Ever, which was in our Yellow Books video. So I'm a big fan. So I probably should get to Undead Girl Gang soon. Cool. Highly recommend.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with What Happened to My Sister. It's a Flying Eye book. We were just discussing, or have discussed, that there's lots of books about going through changes in puberty for boys, and not so much for girls. But this one is either way. If this
no,
is
the other way around.
Sorry, yeah, it is. There are more for girls than for boys. There's not a lot of books about boys going through changes, even though mother of 4 boys with the 13-year-old, they definitely do go through all the changes and emotions. So I really like this book, and this is really what we are going through in our home right now. And a young girl and her sister, they used to be really good friends, even though, you know, it was her older sister. So she looks through the photos at all the fun things they used to do, and now you can see her sister's a lot older here, but all of a sudden her sister's always in her room and doesn't want to play dolls and doesn't want to be around her. So she's always like, this is a discussion we have commonly. Her sister's all of a sudden grumpy. And she just notices like her sister has gone through all these changes now that she's older, and she doesn't want her in her room, and so she's like, what happened to my sister? But really her sister's just growing up and going through puberty. But at the end, her sister actually does end up including her, and they listen to music together, and they kind of rebond through that way. And I just, for me, this is very true to what a younger sibling experiences changes in an older sibling, because my kids have asked me like, oh, what's wrong with him? Why is he grumpy? And then they've asked me, how long does puberty last? Will he be back to normal? So this is a really cute way to address it, and kind of from the point of view of a younger sibling and what do they think. And over the summer we were in Hawaii, and my older son was running through the water and splashing, and my 8-year-old turned to me and he was like, look, he's like it's like he's a kid again. And he's only 13, but you just realize how they take things in, and experience changes that you don't realize like how they're going to take it in, but they do see these things. And so this is a great book to approach when an older sibling starts to go through changes. So
Love Flying High.
yeah, they're great books.
So this is my second bear picture book, and that is a bedtime for bear. This is actually the second in the Bear and Mouse series by Bonnie Becker. They're so funny.
Yeah,
I think
so
this
good.
is my favorite picture book series. So you've got this great big bear who's this like very fastidious, he's got a real routine to everything, and then his neighbor Mouse, who sort of invites himself in to every occasion and inserts himself into Bear's life. So this is, he's come over for a sleepover in this one. And Bear is like, I have a very set bedtime routine. Like, I hope you know that that's gonna remain the same. He's like, oh, of course. But just kind of, like, he's got this teeny tiny little suitcase that Bear carries in for him, and he sleeps in a little matchbox next to his bed. Yeah, they're really sweet, because Bear is always like so grumpy sort of the whole way through. And then Mouse will be like, okay, you know what? Like, I'll leave you be. And then in the first book, A Visitor for Bear, he's like, okay, well, I'll go. And in this one, he's like, okay, well, I guess it is time for sleep then. And then Bear's like, sort of realizes that he actually quite likes having the distraction there, or the chit chat that wouldn't normally be there. And he's like, okay, maybe this isn't so bad after all. Yeah, I love these because they are super fun read alouds. I love the characters, I love the illustrations, and they're full of big words. So they, yeah, good vocabulary. Like, will this torment never cease? Wailed Bear. He's like, oh, sorry, good night, sorry, it won't happen again. They're so funny. There's, I think there's about 4 of these in the series now, so find them all.
Cute.
Yeah.
Alright. So now I have another YA book, and this, I believe, won the Prince Award, which is a pretty big award here in YA, and that is Where Things Come Back by John Corey Whaley. And this is a book about a boy named Cullen, and it is the summer before his senior year of high school, and kind of weird things start happening. For one, a woodpecker that they previously thought was extinct has apparently been sighted in their town, so people are like descending on this small town to find this woodpecker. And his cousin has an overdose, and his 15-year-old brother disappears. So Cullen's having a summer.
Yeah.
And it's just a really, really great kind of character story about Cullen, about him like trying to figure out, you know, Gabriel was, his brother was like acting a bit differently before he went missing, and like just trying to figure out what happened and dealing with being a teenage boy. And it's just, I don't know really how to talk about it more than that, but I love Cullen's character. And it's just, that's kind of it. Like, he makes this fascinating character in this small town. He's trying to deal with stuff. And you also kind of get to see, there's like a story within a story happening. And then when it gets to the end, you make sense, the title of where things come back. Kind of like, ah. But yeah, it's just a fantastic book. Won the Prince Award for a reason. Really short. That will not take you long to fly through. John Crowley Bailey writes some really interesting books that I wouldn't think I would like. He wrote another book called Noggin, which I believe also has a light blue cover, about a boy who gets a head transplant. And at first I was like, this sounds terrible, but it was also like, but it was super well done. He writes really like strange but remarkable stories.
Neat.
So my last one may not be the brightest of blues, but it's a subdued blue, not indigo or dark blue. And that is Together at Midnight by Jennifer Castle. I wanted to include this because it's due back at the library very soon. Just finished it on the weekend, and I loved it. It takes place between Christmas and New Year's, and it's about these two acquaintances with mutual friends who kind of witness this accident and feel this guilt for not being able to help. Like, they feel like, oh, what if we had stepped in? What if we could have done something? And it's kind of a multiple perspective book, so you kind of get the inner monologue from both of them being like, oh, that guy looks like he's gonna help, I don't need to help. And then they're both dealing with this guilt, and they decide after having breakfast together and talking to this waitress that they're going to try and complete 7 random acts of kindness in between Christmas and New Year's. So they're kind of like on this little mission, and they end up spending a lot of time together, and you can kind of tell, like, it's a YA romance. You know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it kind of happened and unfolded in a way that I didn't expect it to, which was nice. And I like that every recipient of the random act of kindness got a chapter after it, which kind of explained where they were in their life at the time this happened and what kind of day they were having and how the random act of kindness affected them, whether it was in a good way or a bad way and stuff. But it was just, I read it in 2 days. I really liked it. And you know, it takes place in New York City, so you know, you get to, and kind of in the area that we've been to, so it was kind of really nice to like visualize and like be with these characters and stuff. So if you want a nice little warm hug, in this one. And a lot of thought-provoking stuff in it too, like what it takes to maybe when you think you're helping someone, you're really not.
Right.
Yeah.
Like this one character staying with his grandfather who needs a new aid worker, but they need to hire one first, so he's spending this week with his grandfather, who he's just been kind of afraid of because he's a grumpy, crotchety old man, and he's like a yes man. He's like, okay, sure, grandpa, yep, sure. And the girl in the book, Kendall, she's like, you're not helping him by doing that. It makes you sound like you're not even listening. So he starts giving the snarkiness back to his grandfather, and they create this better bond for the week that he's there. And they kind of, yeah, it's just really beautiful, all the little things that you can take from it. So I recommend it.
Yeah. Hey, mine is also a warm hug, my last one. Mousy, I will read to you.
Cute.
And it was just sent to me by Rachel Cole over December, so it's really nice and new. And it starts out, Mouse reads to her little mouse. And it goes through the different stages when they're a baby, when they're a toddler, all the different ages you go through when you start to find words of your own, to where you start to pick out books of your own, and then it goes into university, when you study things that your parent may never know about, and then it ends with the little mouse reading to his own very own little mouse. And it's so adorable because it's just about cultivating reading and turning a little one into a lover of books. And so it's just kind of like a love letter. And what I really loved in the back, which doesn't always happen, is there's reading tips. So if you are just starting out with a little reader, there's tips about reading together and things like that. So
cute.
Yeah,
Oh,
such a sweet little,
very precious.
Yeah, and I thought of Karina too. That would be a good one for starting out your little reader.
Oh, that's great. My last one is All's Fair in Middle School by Victoria Jameson. I found this one on my shelf last night. I was sent it, 2017. I think like when we first started OwlCrate Junior, this was sent to me, and I hadn't read it, so I read most of it in the last like 12 hours. I've got this much left. But if you don't know Victoria Jameson, she also did the graphic novel Roller Girl, which was awesome. But this is about 11-year-old Imogen who her parents work in the Florida Renaissance Fair. So she has just grown up basically in the Renaissance Fair. She's been homeschooled up until this point, but she's starting grade 6 at middle school. And it's all told through her eyes, and just kind of this like really jarring transition into a totally new world of like normal kids. And it's really funny, and it's really like I choked up at a couple points just because like the representation of like what it's like to be like 11, 12 and like dealing with mean girls and just like social politics and stuff. I was like, whoa, it really took me back to like just being miserable sometimes. But I have a feeling it's all going to work out for her in the end. She's learned a lot of lessons along the way. But yeah, it is also a graphic novel. This is the ARC, so there's still some black and white pages, but I'm pretty sure that the actual finished copy is all in color. But I love as well that there's like these, each chapter starts with like a sort of medieval Renaissance tapestry type introduction with a little like a little verse about like what's to come for the next chapter. I loved it. I think it would be great for boys and girls, even though the main character is a girl, but it's like a fantastic view into middle school and like what a crazy adjustment that age is. Love it.
Sounds cute. So my last one is a non-fiction book that's mostly essays and little stories, and that is What I Talk About Running by Haruki Murakami. I've talked about this book a lot. I think it was on my, was it last year it was one of my top 10 books of the year? I think it was last year. And it's just, Murakami first is one of my favorite writers. But this, and I knew he was a runner before I read this, but this is just like stories about his life and his relationship with being somebody who runs every single day. He's run many marathons, he's done ultra marathons, it is just like a really fascinating look because it explores his life in relationship to running. So you're getting to see more about his life as a writer and being this like really famous author internationally, because he, I believe, lectures in Boston. He works at a university in America, and being like the celebrity in Japan, and it's just really interesting look at running and this author's life at the same time. I related to a lot because I used to be a runner, so reading it just made me like miss running so much because I could like relate to being like at that point in a marathon where like okay, I need to like find my second wind and like just like getting the runner's high and like things like that, and it's just really beautiful book. I don't think you need to be a runner to appreciate this.
You don't. I listened to it.
Right. So, but yeah, I think it was just like fantastically done, and he's such a talented man. That was my last one.
I thought that it was a neat like look at just like process.
Yeah.
Like, I always love knowing other people's process of like how they do what they do.
Forgot that you would listen to that one.
Yeah.
It's a very good book. Yeah. Alright, so that was some of our favorite light blue books. There are a lot of blue books.
Yeah.
Yes.
There were a lot of tough cuts that I made.
So
Yeah, I had 2 in the other room that I just...
yeah. had to cut it down, but we could be here all day. But we can come back with our next video to do dark blue.
Yes.
So we can stay in the blue for a little bit longer. But if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Leave us any recommendations for your favorite light blue books down in the comments. And subscribe to our channel if you want to see the next video in this series. Happy reading, and thanks for being awesome.
Bye.
Bye.